we are looking forward. It has been a busy time already within the autumn. I think if there's one common thread that's come through in all the communication we've had with you as signatories is, I do think there's been a time that people would say has been slow, but this has been a particularly frenetic, really manic autumn. Thank you to everyone who has submitted data to us and who did so without any chasing or cajoling, and the team are now hard at work. We have some great insights that will be coming to you in the new year based on the data that you've submitted to us. One issue that has come up over the last year, year and a half is, for many of you, you are part of a chain. You either supply into another organization or you have companies that supply into you. And if you really want to drive inclusion and diversity, then looking with new eyes at your signature, at your supply chain, is an important part of the journey. So I'm delighted to have Claudia. If you've listened to some of our events in the past and some of our national events, she is a familiar face and voice. Claudia, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, thank you so much, Debbie, and thank you for having me here today. So hi, everyone, I'm Claudia. So I'm the Commercial Director of FutureProof. What's really interesting is that we fit into both of those categories that you just mentioned there. So not only do we have partners supplying into us, but we also supply into other organisations. Would it be worth me giving a quick overview of what FutureProof do at this stage? Yeah. So we
talk us through the program, and then we'll unpack it for the audience.
Perfect. So FutureProof are essentially we were built to try and help businesses to increase diversity within their tech organizations was one of the core reasons, and the second reason was to help close the digital skills gap, because we all know that the digital skills gap is a really big problem, especially today. The way we do that is by taking individuals from diverse backgrounds, providing them with free training so that they can start embedding and adding value into teams. We then place those individuals into organizations, hence the supplying into organizations part, and then continue to support and develop those individuals over a 2-year program before giving our clients the option to hire those people permanently at the end. So it's all about kind of building capabilities for organizations and giving people opportunities to get into the tech space in the first place.
Okay, so we talk in the first instance that you have a supply chain that you work with. So because you weren't directly recruiting all of these individuals, were you? You had a supply chain. So can you talk to me about how you started to tackle that problem of really making sure that you were getting really diverse people coming through this supply chain?
Absolutely. So I think with us, one of the core kind of measures of success of our program is the people and the quality of people that we have as part of the course and part of the program. And so we wanted to make sure that we were partnering with a variety of different organizations when it looks to how we were actually able to attract those individuals. So what we looked to do was, instead of just focusing on what we could do directly, because we were a relatively small organization, especially when we started, was actually try to leverage some of the networks and organizations that already have those networks. So we have a variety of different partners that we work with to try and get the widest possible applicant pool as possible. And to give you a view, we get about 1,000 people apply for each cohort that we run. And the way that we do that is by having those different partnerships. Those partnerships stem everything from companies that have really strong relationships with universities, and we do a lot of work with universities to try and get recent graduates, but also we work with a lot of non-for-profits, community groups, so that we can access career changers or people that might be wanting to get into tech, might have done some bedroom coding but not actually turned it into a career yet. So that's a big part of our supply chain, is to try and attract people from a variety of different backgrounds.
And I think it's important for the audience to realize this when we're talking about it, because quite often when we do things at the charter and have discussions, if I'm a smaller company, I can feel like, oh, but that's easy if you're a really big corporate doing this. But in this particular space, you were a small player trying to work with a range of suppliers. So how did you try to make sure that you were getting diversity? How did you try and steer the direction when you aren't a big, huge player in the space?
I think we had a lot of learnings when it came to this, because like we've made mistakes. I feel like everyone kind of learns most probably from the mistakes that you make. I think what we've actually learned is not to put all your eggs in one basket, but we did find some partners that we gelled really well with. We got some really good results with early on, and we really built on those partnerships, and we really invested in those partnerships and tried to make those organizations feel like they were a part of what we were doing and part of the decision making. And that's really, really helped us to really, for them to feel like they're part of our organization, and vice versa. And I think that's what's actually really allowed us to, being a relatively smaller player, still have a really influential role in what they're doing and how they're supporting us, if that makes sense.
Okay, so not all eggs in one basket, but I do like that point, because it is about taking people on the journey with you, isn't it? Even if they are a supplier into you, is to use that cloud, however you size. There is a money valuable going cross exchange. And so how we drive that through. Did you set targets? Did you work on SLAs? How did you start building that and raising that accountability?
So when we first started, we had a view that we wanted to open up Future-Proof to as many people as possible and the most diverse applicant pool, but we didn't really have a number in mind. So what we ended up with the first cohort was relatively good results in terms of the diversity, but it gave us a good stepping stone to build from, because from there we could actually look at it and say, right, well, what numbers do we actually want to get to? Where are we aspiring to work towards? And then from there, it was about working out what those SLAs were and working with our partners on those SLAs and looking at different techniques for how we could attract more people from different backgrounds. So, I mean, for example, one of the things that we did, which actually wasn't necessarily the best thing, but the idea was working with this partner to come up with some ideas of how we could increase gender diversity in the applicant pool. And what we found was that, within STEM, for example, the numbers are really low. I think it's 13.5% of current university STEM students are female. So looking at ways to diversify the applicant pool, and we actually ran a brand ambassador program to help recruit more female applicants on campus. That was an idea that we came up with our partner. So it wasn't something that we said, right, we need more female applicants. It's your problem. How can you help us? But actually, we worked with them to come up with different ideas, different routes that we could trial, see what works. And we trialed this brand ambassador program. Unfortunately, it wasn't as successful as we'd hoped. What we found was that because the brand ambassadors weren't necessarily skilled marketeers, or they weren't, able to really properly explain the value proposition, that it wasn't necessarily the best route. But it's about kind of trying new things, trying different ideas, and working together to come up with different options for how we can tackle some of the challenges. And that's really the way that we've approached working with our partners.
And this is important, because this is a concept that would be very familiar to tech, which is to start small, pilot something, gather the data, look at the findings, pivot, and innovate as you go. But I do like what you said there, because sometimes I think the temptation is, well, you're my supplier, I'm just going to set you a big target, an SLA, and you better get there, or I'm going to keep looking. It's, first of all, I like that you started with some data of knowing what was going on out there, because there's no point throwing down impossible SLAs or targets for companies, because that you just get poor behavior, some games behavior. But to try and say, if this is the national stat, if this is what we've seen historically, let's pilot something. But I also like putting, because there is that bravery to be able to say that didn't work, and then to unpack why and to think how you pivot from there. So did you move beyond, were you trying some targets and some SLAs on things more than just gender, or are you sticking with gender in these early days?
No, it's when we talk about diversity, it's so much broader than just gender. We're talking about, every form of diversity, race, ethnicity, neurodiversity, also diversity of thought as well. And actually, this has been a way that we've seen to be a really positive impact to gender diversity, has actually been to target more career changers as well, and people who are not coming straight out the education system. And that has been a really big way to try and increase diversity at all levels. So, we have SLAs for all different types of diversity. What's really interesting, and I guess where we found it more challenging, and it'd be interesting to hear if other organizations have found similar challenges, is that neurodiversity specifically, we find it really difficult to gather data on neurodiversity because a lot of people choose not to disclose because they're fearful of, you know, discrimination, or they choose not to kind of disclose the information, and it's not necessary for them to. So we find it more difficult to gather data on neurodiversity, and we know that there are more neurodiverse students on our course than our data shows, if that makes sense. So yeah, it is a challenge, definitely.
So I'm hearing several things on this. Is one, I like that you're thinking beyond just gender, because we really want to make sure that we've got more diversity. It's got to be more than just one dimension going through. Two, it is important to realize when we gather that data, we can't always assume that the best time to get that data and to get that quality assurance, this is the starting point. Is there different ones? And I'm sure if we're thinking about things like neurodiversity, we're thinking about, we can't just change attraction. There's a lot of things along the process that we have to do. So it's unpacking the whole of the process that we would see that you do. Now, I know the audience would be asking, and when we had some questions given to us before the event, people were really, really desperate to get practical examples. So if you look across what you've been doing with your different partners and the brand ambassadors in work, are there other things that you could tell us did or didn't work that we could learn from?
Yeah, so I guess on the neurodiversity point, I can talk through a change in how we pivoted and how we've changed our processes to try and allow for more neurodiverse applicants. So we used to have a video interview round to our interview process. So we have a 5-stage process for people to be admitted onto the course. And that round, we found actually that we were losing a lot of applicants at that stage who were neurodiverse, because the interview process wasn't necessarily adhering to a lot of individuals who were neurodiverse. And so as a result, we've actually changed the way that we run that interview. So we give people who are neurodiverse the option to send the questions in advance so that they can prepare. We also give them the option to not do the interview on video, but if they would prefer, they can write up the answers. So, you know, small things like that, I think, have made a really big difference. And, you know, we've got some of those tips from some of the partnerships. So, for example, we partner with a charity called Ambitious About Autism, and they've helped us with some of the tips in terms of coming up with some of these ideas. So I think the other thing is around, you know, we can utilize our partners to get some ideas on how we can make changes and what works. So it's not all about us coming up with all the answers ourselves, but actually leaning on the support and the individuals who are experts in this space as well.
I think that's powerful. It is that idea, and you know, if there were nothing else I took from this first part of what we're talking, it is about finding the right partners in your supply chain, but then to turn those into proper partnerships where there is joint ideation, there is joint, you know, I would imagine with some of them, it took some time to even get them on the same page of understanding the why, much less the how of what you did. Were there any companies that you really had, you know, it took a few pushes, but then they really came along with you? And, you know, what changed their mind and got them on the same side as you?
I think actually, so one of our biggest partners is a company called Signatory, and they help us with a lot of the university partnerships. And at first, we had quite a diverse group of different partners that we were using for that specific segment of the market, but actually we found that they were a partner who really worked with us to understand our needs, our capabilities, what we were looking for, and they gave us really good results. And actually, as a result of that, we essentially invested more in the partnership with them. And I think for them, that was really the big thing that helped them to be more kind of in partnership with us, if that makes sense. So I think actually in that example, the action of investment ended up being a lot more than just words, if that makes sense. So the fact that, you know, we had really good experiences and therefore we invested more. And that's what we see on the other side as well. You know, when we work with our clients, often they will start with a trial. They'll start with, bringing on a few people just to see if it works, see how it goes. And normally what we find is that because they've had a really good experience with our people, with us, with the partnership, with the way that we manage, that's actually how we grow those opportunities and that we become properly embedded into those organizations and proper partners. But it does take time. And, that initial engagement is often a show of goodwill, I feel, on both sides, as long as they understand what problems you're trying to solve and you're clearly working with them to show that you're solving the problems that are going to help them towards achieving their goals as an organization.
And I'm hearing on both sides, in terms of clients that hire you and the suppliers you use, that feedback process and the transparency to processes must be really important. How transparent are you with your feedback loop?
I think it's so key, and regular comms is something that we really adhere to on both sides. So we've set up a whole process with our clients as well, in terms of we have a whole team dedicated to monthly one-to-ones with our clients, with our associates, making sure that we have that regular feedback, that we can pick up on challenges or issues early on before they become challenges and issues, and work through them with our clients. And I think it's that idea, and it's the same on the other side. With our partners, we have regular check-ins. We're working with them all the time. We have people who are dedicated to working with those partners. So it is really about them feeling embedded. We even invite them into our team meetings when we've got big, changes happening or big initiatives we're running. We invite our partners to come in and see what's going on within our organization. And that really helps. And it's the same with our clients as well. When they're driving key strategic initiatives, they involve us in what those look like, why the partnership with us is helping them to drive towards those goals. And that really helps us as well to make sure that we're giving them exactly what they need, and vice versa to the partners that we work with as well, I think.
All right, so, and then look at, because, I could sit in a meeting with you and I can say all manner of things. How do you test to make sure what is being said is actually happening on the ground?
So I think what's really interesting is that different organizations will do different levels of due diligence when it comes to the partners that they work with, and also how regularly they review the data, and how, I guess it all depends on how much the data is feeding into their strategic objectives, if that makes sense. So if increasing diversity is a real strategic objective of the organization, we find that those organizations want to have regular feedback sessions, regular reviews on how that's going, and they want to see the data in terms of how we're helping them to increase diversity within their organizations. With the other organizations, we're the ones that drive it more, if that makes sense. So we have quarterly business reviews with our clients where we share this information, but the ones who are really thinking about this and it's a driver for their organization are the ones who are asking us for the data, whereas the ones where we're driving it tends to be that it's just kind of nice anecdotal information, which is good for them to know, but it's not necessarily something that they're assessing us on, if that makes sense. I think with our partners, because diversity is such a key, it's one of the reasons that we exist. We're really hot on understanding what's going on, how things progressed, the real-time data. So it's really important that our partners are also really aware of the data and capturing the data, because it's such an important strategic objective for us.
So you've done a great pivot for me into thinking about, now let's put you on the other side of the table and you have clients. So what are clients asking you that really put you to the test? So when we're talking about the clients that are like you, really trying to drive the diversity and inclusion, really trying to make this, what are they doing, saying? How do you see that, and what are they asking you for?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because there's such a different range in terms of like the level of detail that they'll ask us to go down into. Everything from, we have some organizations that just want to know like the high level data in terms of the applicants coming through. People often want to see a report. So in the quarterly business reviews that we run, we will share diversity data in terms of the individuals that they actually have in their teams and on site. And most of those organizations, if they are really focused on diversity and inclusion, they'll also have SLAs. So we can compare how we're doing in terms of their internal SLAs and how we're helping them drive towards those goals. what's interesting is that if there are, challenges or areas that they're looking to improve, that's normally when they'll ask us to go a level below and to really delve into the data. So, for example, we have one client that are really trying to increase gender diversity, and actually the people that they have brought through from Futureproof, a lot of them have been male. And so they really wanted us to look into, okay, but how diverse was the interview pool in terms of the people that we selected from? And is it a case of our selection process that we need to look into? Or is it a case of, the people that you're providing? So it was kind of going into that data and showing them that actually they had a really, a really diverse group of individuals to select from, but that maybe, the people they were selecting for certain roles happened to be of a certain gender. But it's just, I guess, them making sure they've done that due diligence and that they were getting that information as well. So I think that's, we tend to find that if there's a question, that's when they'll ask us to go a stage deeper, if that makes sense.
Good. So really, whether I'm wanting to be a great supplier or I'm looking to great suppliers, it is knowing that it's a data-rich environment, isn't it? It's every stage of that pipeline process. When you've been asked questions, are there any killer questions or killer terms for an SLA that you think, wow, that was super, I'm going to pass that down and I'm going to do that with my suppliers? Have there been any questions that you've learned and thought, that's a great question to ask, that's a great data point that I should be using?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think, so I guess one of the things that we, as I said, one of the questions that we really struggle to answer is around neurodiversity and disabilities, because of what I said in terms of how to capture the data. And actually, that's a question that we get asked a lot, but we don't necessarily have the best answer for, because we don't know. We just don't have a lot of that information. So I think what we've learned is to ask a lot of our partners how they capture that data so that we can learn from them, and how it's similar to the example I gave earlier about how we changed our interview process. It's more, I guess, the questions we didn't know how to answer ourselves from our clients. If we then ask those same questions to our partners and see how they're doing it, then we might get some ideas about how we can actually impact that and how we can change things moving forward. So I think that's probably one of the biggest learnings that we've had, definitely.
And I think that's the power, as people begin to understand that, of thinking about the entire supply chain, because it is about sharing that best practice up and down that pipeline, that learning up and down the pipeline, and the data that you can gather across the piece. I mean, when we think about data, if I'm thinking about my supply chain, how often could I expect my supplier to provide data? Is there a norm out there? Because, to go too far makes you a really tricky client and becomes unreasonable. What's the norm? What are you seeing out there?
So we see the norm as being quarterly, but in some cases monthly. So that's what we will normally find, depending on the level of partnership. I think the norm in like a normal standard partnership is probably quarterly. If it's a partner that you're doing a lot of work with, that we're really embedded to, or vice versa, are really embedded with us, then I think monthly is not too much to ask for, because actually, if you are really working very closely together, then that data will change very regularly. And actually, it's important to have
moving to monthly allows you to troubleshoot, not just analyze a problem that's finished, but to try and do some midstream improvements going across.
Exactly. And it's exactly about that. It's around not waiting for problems to manifest, but trying to spot the signs early and say, okay, how can we try and impact this? What can we do to change this before it becomes a challenge later down the line?
Cool. All right. Is there anything else that when you've been hearing from your clients that you think, wow, this is going to be a good partner? They're asking for quality, and this is a challenge we're going to need to.
Yeah, I think so. I think, do you know what's really interesting is a lot of people will ask us questions about the type of people that we can provide. But I always find that when organizations are asking us questions about the environment that they need to have to make a successful environment for people from diverse backgrounds, that's when I know that they're a partner that really cares about the success of the individuals and not just about the SLAs or like a tick box exercise essentially. And I think those,
because they've moved on to inclusion, aren't they? They're going
and that's exactly it. Yeah, it's not just about having, not just having the people, but actually making sure their environment is inclusive so that they can create the best environment for these people to be successful. And I think that's really, if I look at our partners where our people are the happiest and where they're the most engaged, it's the organizations that really care about creating an environment where people do feel, fully included, that they feel like they're really comfortable at work, that there are all these initiatives that are happening for them to be successful. And we normally find that the organizations that are doing those things are the ones that are asking us, what do we need to do to make sure that we've got the right environment for these people to be successful? So that's a big sign for us.
And that's a recurrent theme of what you've been talking about, looking at both sides of the desk, is that give and take, is the relationship. It is not just what are you going to do for us, it's what do we need to do, what can we learn, how are we better at building these sorts of partnerships. Right. Now what I want to do, and I'm going to get, the question's going to be trickier for you because I'm going to make you answer it twice. Okay. So what we like to do, Claudia, is to ask this 3 and 3. All right. So this is, if I'm listening to this, what could I do in 3 minutes, 3 weeks, and 3 months? Right. So I'm going to ask you to think about that for a second, but I'm going to ask you to think, first of all, if I'm trying to get my supply chain to be more diverse and inclusive, and then if I'm a supplier, what do I want to do? Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll give you a moment to listen. Here are the takeaways that I've heard so far. There's got to be an intentionality about what we're doing. You have to have a starting point to think about, and setting targets, SLAs, however imperfect, however much that in the first instance is holding our finger in the air. We've got to be willing to start making these relationships. Yes, you start with a large group, and yes, you might be piloting things, but you begin thinking more intentional in creating relationships with those suppliers that you see that there's going to be this nice match. And in doing that, it is then thinking about not just what is the SLA or the target, but what do we need to change or do differently in our processes as well as theirs. That there's that give and take, that there's really crystal clear data unpacking it all the way through, that there are those regular relationship points, quarterly at least, where it needs it, leaning into monthly, that you unpack that to be able to say, this is working, this is not working, this is how we pivot, this is how we could improve it in doing that. That what we're looking at when we're thinking about who we're supplying into, those companies who are really great at that are thinking, what are they doing? What's the culture? How do we need to change in our thinking and our actions and our processes to make that work? And creating these conversations with honest feedback, data-driven, that feeds learning up and down the chain so we can improve much more systemically as we go on. Okay, I'm coming back to you. You're looking more confident now. I think the panic's gone out of your eyes in terms of those things. So Claudia, and again to the audience, this is something I just pitched to Claudia at the moment. So I'm on the call. I really decided I'm going to really look at my supply chain. I'm not going to try and just fix what's happening in my company. I want difference for my supply chain. What could I do in 3 minutes, 3 weeks, and 3 months?
So I think in 3 minutes, it's obviously not a very long time. So it's around just thinking about, am I where I need to be? Do I want to make an impact here, right? And deciding whether there's more that you want to do or not. If the answer is yes, then I guess moving into 3 weeks, then I think that's a bit more time. So it gives you a chance to really think about what are the SLAs that we're trying to drive towards and why? Why is that important to us? How does it actually fit into the goals and objectives that we're trying to reach as an organization? And how does it help us achieve those goals? And then in 3 months, you should start to think about collecting data. In that period, how have things progressed? What are the changes that you're going to make? How are you going to work with your partners to try and improve those numbers? And how are you going to try and have those regular feedback loops, whether it be monthly or quarterly, but having some sort of process in place by the end of that 3 month view to make a change if that is something that you decided that you wanted to do in that first 3 minutes.
Fantastic. Really good. All right, now let's flip it. I'm a supplier. We've got lots of companies in our signatory base who are supplying into clients. I want to start getting more diversity and inclusion in that end of the supply chain. What could I do in 3 minutes? What could I do in 3 weeks? And what could I do in 3 months?
So I think in 3 minutes, it's around looking at, are you happy with the partners, the clients that you're working with today, and the, you know, the level of how much they look at this, and is that comfortable in terms of, you know, are they the right clients for you, essentially, is the first question, which is a really hard question, but
it's a brave question.
It is.
Have you,
it is,
have you
but it's
ever,
important.
Yeah. Have you ever brought a relationship to an end where you thought a client was just not a good fit for you, what you were trying to do in terms of inclusion and diversity?
Yeah, we have actually. Luckily not at the point where we've actually started working with them. It tends to be before, because we realise that they're not the right organisation for us. But we're normally very upfront and honest, actually. When we don't think we're the right supplier or partner for an organisation, we'll just say to them, look, we don't think that we're right for you. And actually our reason for that is because it's not right for the individuals. You know, we don't want to put them into an environment where they're not going to be successful at the end of the day. So I think that's really important, actually. And often we find that clients will respect us a lot more if we say, look, sorry, we're not the right partner for you, than just saying, yes, we'll work with you on any, because actually we really care about our people, and we want to make sure that we're working with the right clients who are going to, you know, who care about the same things as us, if that makes sense.
Okay, so it's looking across to make sure and ask some difficult, maybe scary questions.
Yeah.
Do I have the right partners? Then what can I do in 3 weeks?
So in 3 weeks, I think it's around, it's about doing some analysis, actually. So into, okay, which are the partners that this really ties into their strategic objectives? Which are the ones that we could be doing more on, where we could share the data more regularly, where we could get more involved with them, where we could partner more closely with them, so that we could show them how what we're doing with them is helping them towards their objectives as a business. And then I guess into the 3 months, it's around that, you know, having those regular feedback loops set up, making sure that you have that cadence, that you are really embedded, and that you're articulating the value that you're giving to that organization and how it links back to their strategic objectives. Because I think the thing is with if you're supplying to an organization, up front, when you first start the partnership, the value is very clear because they're signing up to the partnership. But over time, you have to remind that customer of the value that you're giving them. And if you can find ways to tie in the value to their objectives and what they're trying to achieve as an organization, then you can really embed yourself into that organization as a strategic partner. So, you know, if you know that diversity and inclusion is a really important part of their agenda, and it's something that you're helping them with, make sure that that is regularly, you know, reminded to them, if that makes sense, so that you can probably be a part of their organization.
You know, that again is that relationship. Relationships are based on those regular data-led, insight-led conversations and feedback, that and it allows that sort of resyncing, calibration in your relationship with them to make sure things aren't changing for better or for worse, to have that sort of peace and to make sure that you're still aligned. Because I like the way you've talked about it. It is important to align on the why, the value of this. Why is this important, as it is for the how many and the how we're going to do that you keep that put at the heart of what's going. Listen, Claudia, thank you so much. This is the first of many times, I think, that we're going to come back to conversations like that. Thank you for taking the time today. And you know, to the audience, thank you for taking time to tune into this session. I hope what you're hearing from this is, whatever your company size, whatever you're talking about in terms of the scale, and whether you are drawing from suppliers or you are supplying into others, there is power that you have at your access if you bring this intentionality, if you bring this data-led, target-led, SLA-led, and creating relationships that are moving beyond this mere transactional expression into something that's different. Because we know the whole pipeline is broken. So only if we start moving to these more systemic ways of thinking and acting and working together do we genuinely move the dial on this. It's a busy month ahead. It's nearly looking into November. If you haven't already, make sure that you're having a look at our newsletter. We have a new newsletter that's now coming out monthly to understand what's coming up, what's gone behind that you might have missed out on. There are exciting things if you're interested into that roots in tech, what we used to call alt roots into tech. We've now done some more information on the website. It was launched at Birmingham Tech Week. This is an exciting chance for you as a company, whether you are a supplier or you're drawing from that supply chain, to really think about how these routes into tech can enhance, can augment what you're doing on diversity and inclusion. Reports to come in the new year, lots more forums to sign up for, some learning sessions. It's all happening here, but I know we've got to get you back to your desk. Thank you so much for joining us. Claudia, thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for everyone for being patient in my little tech challenge of doing this all from my phone. I hope to see you next time from my laptop. It's been lovely. I hope you have a fantastic day.